For over 2 million years, human survival hinged on a single question: what can we catch before nightfall? Before agriculture, before permanent homes, before written language, our ancestors lived or died by the hunt, but what exactly did they spend their days chasing? The image of mammoth hunters with raised spears is iconic but misleading. The truth is far more intricate. Some mornings they waited in silence at watering holes. Other days they tracked antelope across ridges, following faint impressions for hours. Most efforts failed. But each attempt meant food or hunger for the group. In the minutes ahead, we'll explore the animals they hunted, the tools they used, and the skills that carried them across nearly 80,000 generations. The life of a Paleolithic hunter wasn't about one big chase, but about always moving and always adjusting. Hunting wasn't just one thing they did. It was a way of living that shaped each day, each season, and their whole life. At sunrise, they started moving. Hunters spread out quietly, looking for signs. A snapped stick, a bent piece of grass, a hoof mark in wet ground. These were small hints that started a long and careful process. It took more patience than power. What they hunted depended on where they were and what animals were nearby. One group might follow a herd for days without getting a good chance. Another group might change their target if the wind shifted. Hunting had to be flexible, always changing, and full of risk. Nature gave no promises. In the forest, animals could disappear into the bushes. On open land, they might see you before you even raised your spear. Even with practice and teamwork, catching something was never sure. Hunters needed more than strength. They needed to know the land, the weather, and how animals acted, things they learned from others over time. The most important part wasn't the kill, it was everything before that. Reading the land, moving quietly, knowing when to wait and when to act. These skills helped feed the group more often than one lucky throw. And when they did catch something, the hard part wasn't over. Then came cutting it up, carrying it back, and cooking it. But before all that, there was always the hunt. The slow, careful chase that helped shape what it meant to be human. But if the hunt shaped daily life, what traces did it leave behind for us to discover today? Proof of old hunts is still hidden in the ground where hunters once met animals. At old hunting spots around the world, scientists find bones that tell stories. The bones of deer or bison often have clear-cut marks where sharp stones were used to slice through meat and tendons. Sometimes a stone's spear point is still stuck in a rib or backbone, showing the moment of the kill. These broken bones show a moment when hunter and animal came face to face. At old campsites, piles of animal bones are found near old fire pits. Layers of black ash and burnt wood show where fires once burned. By studying the lines on the bones, experts can guess how old the animal was. Worn teeth or horns can show what kind of animal it was and whether it was male or female. Tiny studies of the bone pieces sometimes find leftover fat, showing how people cooked or took out the soft marrow inside. Each broken bone becomes a clue about the hard work of hunting and the chance of success. Modern scientists also try hands-on tests to better understand these bones. They make copies of old spears and throw them at animal bodies to learn how the old hunters may have done it. They also cut up animal bodies to match the marks on old bones, learning how hunters took off the meat, skin, and organs. These tests help bring old hunting scenes back to life. Watching today's hunters also helps. In parts of Africa and Australia, some people still hunt antelope or kangaroo using the same kinds of tools and tricks. Watching how they follow tracks or pick hiding spots gives useful ideas. The way they learn about animals and seasons from parents and grandparents is a direct link to how old hunters learn too. All these clues help us understand what cavemen did each day and how they lived with a world that was always changing. But what kinds of tools did these early people use to make their hunts possible? Early hunters used spears made from straight sticks with sharp stone tips tied tightly at the end. These spears were made to work both as throwing weapons and for close-up fights. Hunters picked straight pieces of wood and shaped stone tips to fit well into the ends. They tied them on using things like animal tendons or plant strings soaked in sticky sap to make them stronger. Later, hunters began using a tool called an atlatl. This was a simple stick that helped throw spears farther and harder. With an atlatl, a hunter could hit a large animal from 40 to 60 feet away. Making a good atlatl took practice. The wood had to be strong but bendy and shaped just right so the spear stayed in place until it was thrown. In some places, bows and arrows came next. Scientists have found old wooden bows at sites where people hunted small animals and birds. Early bows were made from wood like yew or ash. Over time, hunters learned that the kind of wood and its thickness changed how the bow worked. Arrows had feathers on the back to help them fly straight. Bows took more time to make, but they let hunters shoot quietly and from far away. Hunters also used simple traps and snares. They dug small holes covered with branches to catch animals like rabbits. They made loops from string or vines and set them along paths where animals walked. These traps worked best when hunters knew where animals went and how they acted. Each tool was part of a group effort. People worked together to make sharp stone pieces. Others fixed broken parts. Everyone shared what they knew, and the skills were passed down through the years. Making tools wasn't just one person's job, it was something the whole group helped with, making sure every hunter was ready before they left camp at sunrise. But even with good tools, how did hunters take on massive animals like mammoths and bison? Across the wide Ice Age plains, large groups of mammoths or bison moved around looking for food. Hunters learned to work together to bring down these huge animals. They watched where the animals went and waited for the herds to gather near places like river bends or between big rocks. At the right moment, the hunters moved together, pushing the animals into tight spaces where they couldn't run away easily. Places like Kostanki in Russia and Schöningen in Germany show proof of these big hunts. At Kostanki, scientists found many bison bones spread out across the land, as if the herd had been chased into a pit or over a drop. Nearby fire spots had bones that had been picked clean. At Schöningen, hunters seem to have trapped wild horses or large cows near shallow water and killed many at once. These big kills took a lot of planning and timing. Hunting mammoths or bison was very risky. One wrong step could lead to injury or even death from animals running in fear, but the reward was big. One bison gave enough meat, skin, and bone to help feed and clothe a whole group for weeks. The inside of bones had fat that gave lots of energy. Skins were used for clothes and shelter, while bones were turned into tools, needles, and even simple art. The chance for lots of food made these dangerous hunts worth it. Big hunts needed more than speed or strength. Hunters had to talk clearly and use signs to move the animals the right way. They met ahead of time to plan. Some made noise to scare the animals in one direction, while others waited quietly in hiding. After the hunt, the group worked together to take off the skin, cut the meat, and carry important parts back to camp. Bones were cracked open for fat or shaped into useful tools. These hunts brought people closer. Sharing food and working side by side built trust. The skills and knowledge needed for big hunts were passed down over time. In a world where people had to help each other to survive, a successful hunt wasn't just about food, it showed the strength and teamwork of the whole group. Not every hunt involved giants, though, so what about the smaller animals that filled in the gaps? Deer, elk, and wild goats were some of the most common animals hunted by people walking through forests or rocky hills. These animals needed a different plan than huge hunts for mammoths or bison. A small group or even one person could follow tracks or watch for signs where animals had been eating. Hunters learned to move slowly and quietly, hiding behind fallen trees or thick bushes to stay out of sight. One common method was to wait near salt spots or water places where deer came at sunrise or sunset. Waiting took a lot of patience. A hunter might lie still for hours before a deer walked into view. Sometimes they used smoke to hide their smell or to push animals toward a good hiding spot. A small fire made just enough smoke to gently move a group of animals without scaring the rest nearby. Younger or less skilled hunters often started with medium-sized animals before going after bigger ones. Hunting alone helped them learn how animals acted, and smaller animals were easier to carry. When 2 or 3 people hunted together, they could work as a team. One would distract the animal while the other got close for a clean shot. Once an animal was caught, hunters had to decide whether to cut it up there or bring it back whole. How far the camp was and how many people were hunting helped them choose. If a young deer had enough meat for one family, they might carry the whole body. But if a storm was coming or the land was hard to cross, they would cut off the best meat and leave the rest. Bones were often left behind, but broken in a way that showed meat or fat had been taken. The time of year and group size also mattered. In cold weather, meat stayed fresh longer, so hunters could take their time and carry bigger pieces. If many people were around, it was easier to bring back a whole animal. These kinds of hunts gave steady food and helped hunters get better at tracking and moving quietly, skills they needed to survive. And when those weren't enough, how did early people make use of birds, fish, and even insects? For many early groups, small animals and birds were an important part of daily meals. Light spears made from thin wood or bone helped hunters catch ducks, geese, or grouse in shallow water or thick bushes. Feathers were used on the back of the spears to help them fly better when thrown or poked at birds hiding in the dark. Simple nets made from twisted plant strings could trap wings and legs, letting hunters grab birds quickly during bird-moving seasons. Traps made from soft vines or bendy sticks were set on paths animals used. One rabbit or small animal could feed a family when big animals were hard to find. Hunters often placed traps where animals walked through open spaces. Fishing took a good eye and some practice. Small hooks made from rock or bone were tied to strings made from plants. Hunters stood by the water or walked into shallow parts using low walls of stones to push fish into small spaces. On the coast, rafts made of logs let them reach deeper water. Catching fish needed patience sometimes. They waited for fish to swim into the right spot before using nets or spears. The time of year changed what people hunted. In spring, rivers were too full and fast for fishing. In summer, lower water made it easier to find fish in small pools. In autumn, birds flew through wet areas in large groups. Small animals helped keep families full between big hunts and meant hunters didn't have to chase big animals as often. When food was really hard to find, insects helped. People could grab bugs like locusts or dig into termite hills. Bugs were eaten raw or roasted over fire until they were crunchy. They gave needed energy during tough times. By hunting small animals, birds, fish, and even bugs, early people made sure they always had something to eat. But depending on where they lived, what kinds of animals did different groups rely on most? In cold, flat areas like the tundra or grassy plains, huge open lands stretched out under the sky. Herds of reindeer and musk ox walked across these wide spaces with no trees for cover. Hunters followed these animals as they moved, looking for footprints and torn plants. When a herd stopped near a small river or salt patch, hunters moved in, using the wind to stay quiet and hidden. These animals moved with the season, so hunters had to walk far and set up camps near water or narrow paths where animals passed through. Forests were a different kind of challenge. Thick trees hid animals like deer, wild pigs, and many birds. Blending in was very important here. Hunters rubbed natural colors on their faces and wore clothes covered with leaves and sticks to hide better. They walked quietly on soft moss, listening for snapping twigs or moving leaves. Sometimes they copied bird sounds to find animals or to call them closer. Near oceans and rivers, seals rested on rocks and fish swam near the shore. Hunters made simple boats from tied logs or carved out tree trunks to reach deeper water. They used sharp-tipped spears made of bone or wood to hit seals lying on ice or rocks. Shallow tide pools had shellfish and small sea animals that gave steady food. Plant fiber nets were placed in narrow water paths so fish would swim into them. In warm forests, monkeys and small deer moved in the trees and bushes. Hunters climbed trees to hang traps or waited near fruit trees where animals came to eat. On the ground, they hid traps under leaves to catch rats and other small animals. Insects and big lizards were also eaten in these hot and wet places. Each land had its own animals and needed its own hunting style. Whether in cold plains, dark woods, rocky shores, or thick forests, early people changed how they hunted to match the land around them. They survived by knowing the animals and the land very well. So what did a full day of hunting actually look like for these people? Before the sun came up, hunters left their sleeping spots carrying spears, bows, and simple tools. The darkness helped hide them as they looked for signs that animals had passed by fresh tracks or broken branches. They knelt to check hoof marks or bird prints and picked a path to follow. This early search helped shape the rest of the day. They walked quietly to avoid loud steps and kept their eyes on small changes in the land. By the middle of the day, hunters often stopped to rest near trees or by a stream. They used stone pieces to sharpen their spears and fixed loose parts on arrows or traps. The group came together to talk about what they had seen. One might say they found fresh deer tracks near a river, while another might mention signs of wild pigs digging in wet ground. These short meetings helped them make new plans before the best hunting time at sunset. In the evening, animals moved more. Deer and elk came out to eat in open fields, and birds flew up to rest in trees. Hunters spread out on hills or waited near narrow animal paths. Some made quiet animal sounds to bring them closer. Others stayed quiet and used hand signs to talk. The dark helped them stay hidden, but also made it harder to see. When a hunter caught a deer or pig, the walk back to camp felt like a win, but they had to hurry. The meat had to be cleaned fast so it didn't spoil or bring in other animals. If they didn't catch big game, they might return with birds or small animals to share, showing they still tried while waiting for better luck. Women and children helped too. They found food to use in traps or scared small animals from bushes. They passed messages between hunting groups and those cooking at camp. They also helped with fire and cleaning skins. Older people gave advice on when animals might move, while young ones watched and learned how to read the wind and smells in the air. Not catching anything didn't mean they gave up. They stayed hungry and ready to try again. Each new morning was a chance to find tracks, set traps, or sit quietly near water. A hunter's life was full of watching, trying, and learning, always moving with the rising and setting sun. Beyond daily routines, what role did hunting play in their culture and beliefs? Paintings on cave walls, deep under rocky cliffs, show that hunting was more than just a way to get food. Pictures of bison, horses, and deer were drawn in red and black, showing movement across the rough stone. These images didn't just show animals, they honored the hunt itself. Sometimes, nearby spears or sharp stone tools had lines or animal shapes carved into them, which may have meant they were used as lucky items, not just tools. Young hunters often had to go through special steps to join the group. An older hunter might lead a new one to a quiet place where they believed the spirits of old hunts stayed. In some places, a young person would paint their hands or face with colored clay from a special spot before going on their first deer hunt. These actions helped pass down hunting skills while also making the moment feel important and full of meaning. Bones from special hunts were sometimes kept and used in group events. Big bones or skulls might be placed in certain spots or carried on sticks during group meetings. These bones showed respect for the animal that had helped feed the people. Spiritual leaders may have used drumming or singing near these bones to ask for help in future hunts or to keep away bad luck. After a good hunt, people came together to eat and celebrate around the fire. Meat was shared with everyone, and groups sometimes met to grow closer and remember past hunts. These meals were also times for stories where people honored both the hunter and the animal. Sharing food also helped different groups stay friendly and pass along useful news about where animals moved, where water could be found, and how the weather was changing. These events made hunting not just about food, but about community and working together. By adding meaning and respect to the hunt, early people showed care for the animals they hunted and their place in the world. Hunting wasn't just killing, it was part of a bigger story about life, memory, and the deep bond between people and nature. And finally, what lessons from those ancient hunts still matter to us today? Hunting long ago took many forms depending on the season, land, and animals nearby. There was no one kind of caveman hunt. Each group used methods that worked best where they lived, chasing reindeer on open land, sneaking up on deer in the forest, or throwing spears into rivers. How much time they spent tracking or trapping animals depended on their skills, how many people were in the group, and what they needed that day. Early hunters were more than people with weapons. They were good at spotting tracks in soft ground, they knew how animals acted, and they helped lead their groups by sharing work and food. They understood when animals moved, how healthy the herds were, and when baby animals were born. This helped them avoid hunting too much so that animals would still be there in the future. Today, we can still learn from these early hunters. Many modern hunters follow rules about when and how much they can hunt, just like early people had to. Groups that protect animals in nature now work to fix damaged lands and keep track of animal numbers, showing that we are still part of the natural world. Caring for animals and the places they live still shapes what we believe and how we live. Picture one last scene. A hunter stands alone on a small hill just before sunrise. The wind smells like wet ground and far-off trees. In the dim light, a group of elk walks out from the dark valley. The hunter stays still, holding a spear, knowing that taking a life means something. It's not just about staying alive, it's about respect, care, and the deep link between people and nature that started with the first hunts.